Hey, Edified Tribe. Thank you for tuning in to Edified Minds Podcast, where I talk about issues young Black women are facing regarding relationships, self-love, and accountability. I do so by incorporating God's standards, teaching you to unlearn toxic social media culture, and addressing Black culture debacles. So today I've got a guest, and I met her maybe, early last year?
Yes.
Last year at Pray ATL 24/7. And that's literally where we prayed for 24 hours straight.
24 hours straight.
24 hours straight. I had never done that before, but it was at my church United. And it was like when I saw her on stage, it was like a light was shining down on her. Like, I don't know, you were very, very edifying, and you were very open about your testimony and praying for others. Yeah. And then we were all called to the pulpit, and then she came up to me and was like, I felt led to pray for you and to speak with you. So it was kind of like we saw each other, like that girl type of energy where it's like, girl, I see you.
Like, I got you.
I got you.
Here.
You know what I mean? So I want to welcome Alexis. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Before we get started with anything, tell us who you are, where you're from. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, all that.
Okay. I'm Alexis. I'm from Manhattan, New York.
New York.
Yes.
Look,
we here. We here. I am a prophetic poet, and I'm a makeup artist as well. I'm an all-around mental health creative, so I help people expand and grow in their calling, but also looking inwardly and healing from what's deep inside of them so they can really do what God is calling them to do. Because if you can't heal inside, then how can you really effectively help someone else overcome what you also are going through right now or have overcame? So that's who I am, and that's what I do. So I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait. Let's dive in.
I love that. So that makes me want to just kick up with a vibe check, right?
Yeah.
So I was watching a sermon earlier this week, and I forgot if it was Michael Todd or Robert Madu, but a guest was saying that our feelings are tied to a spirit. So when you wake up in the morning, if you feel good, probably your spirit is high. Yeah. Or sometimes if you have a spirit that's around about fear, you may wake up feeling anxious, right? Yeah. So instead of saying, how do you feel? It's more so, what are you thinking? So my question is, what did you wake up thinking this morning? And even in this moment, what have we been thinking today?
I've been really in tune with what I'm feeling, and in regards to just feeling overwhelmed and feeling a sense of anxiety of what's to come and what's going to happen. I know my steps are ordered by God, and I know that there's so much greatness and I'm doing what he's telling me to do behind the scenes. But then there's a sense of that I don't show people that I'm sometimes anxious or overwhelmed. So that's kind of what my thoughts have been wrapped around, but also identifying those thoughts and then saying, God, help me to overcome what I'm going through. Yeah. And help me wrap your word around my mind that feels so wonky or out of place.
Yeah. I feel the same way. It's kind of I'm in a season of change. Yeah. And I spoke about this, I want to say in episode 3 or 4, where I addressed I've been feeling this weird feeling of change, and change is needed, don't get me wrong, but it makes you feel anxious. And then on top of that, if you don't know what's to come, you start to become fearful because it's just the unknown. Yeah. And it's I'm struggling between fear, faith, and making sure that I don't let fear come my emotions. But at the same time, just being real with God, I'm a little afraid, you know what I mean? And nothing's wrong with being afraid, but it's when you let it take over when it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
You know?
And then it starts with our heart. It starts with our mind, and then it sometimes seeps into our heart. And then we begin to say certain things that unbeknownst to us, we're oh man, we're saying the thing that we're thinking and feeling, and then that becomes a routine of, I feel this way and I don't know how to get out of it, and how do I trust God out of what I just put myself in,
right,
mentally.
For sure. Before I asked you to come on, I looked on your Instagram and I saw that you call yourself the prophetic poet, right?
Oh yeah.
I grew up in a Baptist church,
girl,
and in Baptist church, if you've been to a Baptist church, it's not too over the top when it comes to spirituality. I didn't know about spiritual gifts. I wasn't aware, but when I think of a prophet or someone being prophetic, that is a gift, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. It does. You know what I mean?
I'd be like, God,
Right. Yeah. Like I guess why me, but at the same time, thank you for giving it to me.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out my spiritual gifts, if I'm being quite honest. Yeah. But I guess like, what made you realize you were prophetic? Were you told it as a child? Like what made you start feeling that was your gift?
Honestly, when I was younger, I used to see certain things. So I'm also a seer. Mm-hmm. So when I was younger, I always used to see things and I didn't understand what it was, how it was. Yeah. And then sometimes I would see things and then I would know certain things before it happened. And then I would see it before my eyes happening. And I'm like, I just saw that like last week. So I guess as I gotten older, like I started to hear about prophets and prophetic giftings and like being able to see, and started reading books. And I'm like, I have that. And then I started taking prophetic classes, and that's how I kind of figured out, oh, I have a prophetic gifting. Because I went to a church one time, and it was almost like they made me feel so crazy for seeing the things that I did, hearing the things that I did. And I think in that moment, like even people in that church told me like I'm prophetic and I have a prophetic gifting. So I had people actually tell me, this is what you
So they told you that?
Yeah, they told me that. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is what this is it. And I'm like, I've never really, but then I've also gotten called over spiritual or no earthly good because of being able to see the way I did. And I don't want God to show me what I see. He just shows it to me. And I'm like, I have to be obedient because the call is so great that I'm just like, I don't want it, God. But he's like, no, I gave it to you. So you gotta use it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it can get a little scary, I think, because you know how people say psychics, like that's not good, right?
Yeah.
But if he does give you a gift, if you use it the way that he wants you to use it, then that's okay.
Yeah.
And before I knew about witchcraft and stuff, I went to a psychic. I'll be real.
Girl, be honest, bro.
The stuff she was telling me, sis, I was like, how did you know that? Like, that was strange to me.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, she could be telling anybody this. It's kind of like general knowledge. Like, oh, you're going to get married one day. You're going to have twins. But it's kind of weird because twins do run in my family. So I thought to myself, oh my gosh, she does have a gift.
Yeah.
And then just to know that God has given her that gift, she just chooses to use it a certain way. I thought to myself, do you ever feel like it's kind of a blessing and a curse?
It is a blessing and a curse because sometimes you hear conversations or sometimes you see stuff and I'm just like, God, I really don't want to hear that, or I really don't want to like indulge in that. But I've learned to not allow certain things that I hear and see cause me to be upset, but pray about it.
Yeah. So like when I think of 24 or ATL 24/7, like when we met, you were on stage and you were speaking that prophetic talk. You were talking. Did it ever get like, were you ever to a point where you were afraid to openly speak out about it? And what made you actually be able to say like, yes, I'm prophetic, I wear it proudly, and this is who I am?
I think that when I went through people calling me weird or overly spiritual or girl, she act like she know it all, or I gotten called all the names in the book, like by people in leadership. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, like this is what they did to Jesus for real. Like this is what they did to him. Like they don't like me because God is showing me things that can expose you, but not in a negative way, but to really say, hey, yo, like, I'm not trying to expose you. I'm trying to show you so God can show you, so we can pray for you, so we can really move forward effectively in healing, in identifying what caused you to say that and do that and be that, so we can effectively move forward so you can help other people.
Right.
So I think like, I get afraid going up on stage, like really talking and doing poetry because it's so different. I remember I would write poetry. One time I wrote poetry and years back, I think it was like probably 6 years ago, I wrote poetry, and the poetry that I written 6 years ago, it happened 4 years later. And God literally had me go back to those same like pile of poems, and I literally read poem after poem after poem, and it happened. And I was like, ooh-wee. So I remember I was in the car with my friend, and she was like, Alexis, this is prophetic. Like you're prophetically declaring something over yourself and others. Right. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, prophetic poet. And that's kind of how prophetic poetry happened. Like God revealed it to me. And then it's like my friend was like, no, this is what it is. And it resonated with me so much. I was like, I can't hide myself anymore. I can't be that scared girl hiding because I have a gift and so afraid to use it because of what people said.
Right. And we all need those spiritual sisters though that can tell us what our gifts are and openly tell us to not be afraid or to not be ashamed of it. Like that's the better word. Don't be ashamed because other people may not like it at that moment. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I had a prophetic woman that I met last year. And I didn't like how she was reading me. Like she got in my car and she got straight to it.
Oh no.
She got straight to it. Like you're lukewarm. That's something that I've been called a lot. Lukewarm. You're 1 foot in, 1 out. You should be a celebrity. You're not really walking in your gift because of what your mom said to you. And I ain't gonna lie, she wasn't lying. But I'm like, who are you to tell me that? I don't know you. How do you know me so well? And I guess that leads me to ask, like, what do you think people are so fearful of today most? Because I just feel like that scared me to know what my future could be, why I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And she told me, she was like, I can sense that you're afraid, but you don't need to be. A lot of people are afraid when I give them prophetic readings or I tell them, you know, what I see. What do you think that people are scared of most?
Sometimes fear of succeeding. Fear of overcoming to become what God says we are, because we feel like we're inadequate. Like we feel like we can't be that. Why? Because of our past. Because trauma also causes us to like block like any form of like goodness that can be and is. God already said we're those things. God already said you're a celebrity. God already said all these things, and He already put that. Girl, He wrote. It's like He wrote it in a book and said, "This is her. This is where she's gonna be. This is what's gonna happen." And it's like I feel like people are so afraid of the possibilities of what can be and what already is, because God already said it's so. And if God already said it's so, then it's like nothing should hinder us, right? But we go through things in life. We have doubts, but I think inadequacy is one of the biggest things. Like us not feeling like we're good enough for the call. And sometimes distractions like veer us off.
Yeah. And I would say I totally agree with you on that. It's like not knowing if we're adequate enough. But because you're a mental health coach, I got to bring this up. The reason why a lot of us don't feel like we're adequate enough is because of what we've been told. I mean, if you grew up and your mom is always saying that you're irresponsible, your dad is saying you don't do this, you don't do that, how could I even think that God would say I'm going to be this? You know, because all I hear is the opposite. And it's one of those things where when you turn it off, you know, I know I struggle a lot with having to unlearn things that were embedded in me when I was younger. And we find ways to unlearn things all the time though. Like we've unlearned the good things our parents have said, but how do we unlearn the bad things that have been said to us? Not even just by our parents, by friends, by teachers, whatever. I see a shift though in social media. I see a shift, especially when it comes to like Christian TikTok and stuff. I was so focused on like negative content at one point. And now I'm getting more into like that Christian TikTok and stuff. How does it feel seeing that shift that people are choosing a side, you know, and they're choosing to go God's way and not allow their traumas to dictate their lives, not allow the enemy to tell them where they're going to go, but they're choosing a side openly and actively.
I think that's a great thing. I really think that's a great thing because like it's about being authentic. It's about being who God called you to be, but also showing that like you don't have to be perfect. Like we don't have to have it all together. We don't have to have our ducks in a row before we come to God. God says to come to Him as we are, not to be like, oh, I have to get my mind right. I have to get my heart right. I have to get XYZ right. No, God just wants you to come to Him. He wants your heart. He wants not your performance. So it's like, I would say like, I actually love it. And it's like, let's take what we see on social media and let's bring it out to the world. Let's have more events. Let's really go to certain places and spaces. Like honestly, before I started going to Christian spaces, I went to clubs because God was like, you need to go to clubs. And I was like, God, what?
That's where people need to be saved the most at. And the places that we probably shouldn't be at is like those people are probably yearning for someone to save them. You know, or at least direct them. Direct them and let them know what's out there. Because I'm realizing a lot of people aren't evil the way I thought. Like, oh, you're choosing this. Maybe they just don't know. And so they need us to let them know, hey, God does love you. God is here. God, you know, maybe they just need to be led. You know?
I think so because like Jesus hung out with sinners too. Like
all the time.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? We can't be in the four walls of the church. We have to go outside of the church and be the feet of Jesus and the light and say, hey, like, not condemning you, but saying, I love you enough to show you a man that saved me from what I'm going through. And that in itself, not shoving Jesus in your face, but saying, I used to deal with suicide. Let me help you out. This is what God helped me with, and let me help you.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with makeup, like helping people overcome to become who they're called to be. In my chair, they're really centered around, let's have a conversation.
Right. And see, that's what I'm trying to stray away from, though.
Yeah.
Because in season 1 of Edified Minds, I felt like I was shoving it down people's throats.
Yeah.
But I was like cussing in the same episode that I'm like doing a scripture at the end. Like, I'm not perfect, you know, but I can tell you that there was a time where I had a whole face, for example, and God pulled me out of that. I can tell you that I've struggled with having a big mouth and disrespecting people, and God had to show me, sis, you need to tighten up. I can speak to it, but I may not know how to necessarily voice it the Christian way. And I don't think there is a Christian way. I feel like I could tell my testimony however way I need to tell it. Period. And whoever's going to receive it will receive it. You know?
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing of being authentic and being you.
Right.
Girl, I was over here drunk at the church sometimes. Sunday. Girl, the night before. I'm telling you. Like, I don't be telling people this because I don't know. I just keep it to myself. But like, there'll be nights where I got drunk the night before. And I'm so for real. And people are like, not Alexis. Oh my God. And I know people are probably judging now. But like.
Yes, me.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, drunk, but the night before. Then waking up, still feeling the same drunkenness that I felt the night before, and then going to church on Sunday and being like, Lord, I love you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, it's a real thing, and people have to like grace people where they were, because like, if I didn't have someone that graced me, like my family or people around me, I would not be here.
See, that's the thing. Like, I didn't know about church hurt until I went to my church. And then I started having so many friends who are like preachers' kids, and they tell me about church hurt. My Grammy let me go to church, you know, if I wanted to. And sometimes we play hooky together. Like, she'd be like, let's just skip church, you know? Yeah. And I feel like our generation is straying away from the stereotype of Christians, right? Yeah. Being super judgmental, wanting to act like they're higher than thou. But I see a lot of people making a point to say that they're not religious. They'll be like, oh, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And I looked it up, sis. It's the same thing. I don't know if y'all know this. It's the same thing. Religious just means that you're more so tied to like a domination or, you know, like a
system.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But spiritual still means that you do adhere to a religion. So why do you think people try to make it such a big point to say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual? What do you think they think the difference is?
I don't know. But when I think of spiritual, I think of like demonic. I think of like, oh my goodness, like, it's the first word that came out was demonic.
Right.
It's just like,
because who are you praying to? You don't know who you're praying to.
Because you could be,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole ancestor thing. What if my ancestor was a whole molester out here and I'm praying to my ancestors? I don't know who my ancestors are.
Exactly.
And you're praying to the unknown.
Exactly. Like cults and like different things that behind the scenes, like, girl, it's a whole like fine line that is just, I'm over here like, God, it's It's one of those things where, once again, I don't want to shove it down anybody's throats. Yeah.
But I don't know if people understand the severity of it at times.
It's serious.
I never knew the severity of it. Like I said, I just went to a psychic, 2020, because I was so lost.
Yeah.
And that was right before I got rebaptized. Mm-hmm. Because that's actually why I went to United, because of Alex. You know Alex, the worship leader. Yes. Shout out to you, Alex. But I went to United because of him. Yeah. Soon after, I knew, oh Lord, I am kind of lost in this whole spirituality thing, as far as like my religion goes. Yeah. And I want to just go ahead and start over, get rebaptized. And I started to actively search for answers. And I learned that I was doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to like tell people that, because I feel like that's why people stray away from religion sometimes, because there's too many rules. But don't you have to kind of abide by rules to be successful? I mean,
bing, 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 bing. Okay. That's the biggest thing, rules. When people think of religion, they think of rules.
Right.
And it's like a book. Some people call the Bible like a book of rules. And it's like, no, if you actually sat down and read the word, like, there's stories in the Bible that's going to help you overcome what you're going through right now. But because you're so afraid of like opening the word, you can't find answers. You can't find what you're looking for by going to the world.
Right.
And I think religion is more of like a systematic like thing where it's like you're doing the same thing over and over again and wanting like almost like insanity, wanting different results, but it's like you keep rehearsing the same thing, and it's like think of people that worship statues and things like that. Girl,
yeah.
I went too far.
We get too deep. We get too deep for them.
Yeah, they're not ready.
I don't even know.
Yeah, no.
But you know, this is a good stopping point because I want to do a segment and it's called Edified Eyes. Okay, yes. Edified Eyes. I'm gonna show you a social media clip. We're gonna dissect it together, talk about it, and then we'll get back to the interview. So how does that sound?
That sounds good. Cool. I'm excited.
A lot of people disagree with the Bible because the Bible goes against all flesh desires. A lot of people think that God is strict and God ain't no fun and whatnot, when in all reality, God is protecting us from what we can't see. For example, let's talk about the hookup culture. The Bible says to flee from fornication, flee sexual sin. He ain't just telling you, hey, don't have sex. He's telling you, nah, like, run as fast as you can from sexual sin. The hookup culture is so normalized now, people really just do not see it, and it's crazy. The devil really put like a veil over people's eyes so they can't see the truth. Only some people really know the type of energy transfer that goes on when you're having sex. It's like an energy transaction. It's like a spiritual transfer. If somebody has like a spirit of depression, a spirit of suicide on them, and you have sex with them, that spirit ends up transferring onto you. Have you ever had sex with somebody and then noticed that you started being angry afterwards? You started like having feelings of murdering somebody. You have these feelings of like sadness. You want to kill yourself. It's because you may have laid with somebody that inhabits those evil spirits. They also don't talk about soul ties. Like, come on now, when you have sex, you create soul ties, whether they're strong or not. But those strong ones, if you know, then you know. It ain't nothing worse than having a strong soul tie to somebody who constantly does you wrong. Does not respect you. He or she is not sent from God. Come on. God told me to get up on here and speak on the fact that we really have veils over our eyes. Like, as far as everything that goes on spiritually in this world, the amount of spiritual warfare that everybody is on, everybody has a veil over their eyes. Everybody's too busy looking at the planets and the stars and the astrology, or everybody's too busy hooking up, or everybody too busy doing drugs, everybody too busy doing this, and that, and the third. One day everybody gonna look up and realize God left them behind because they couldn't get right. They had to get left. The Bible says that the pathway to heaven is narrow, but the pathway to hell is broad. So, what you choosing?
What you choosing?
Wasn't that good?
That was great.
I saw that maybe a couple months ago and I saved it on TikTok and I wanted to just dissect it because it's one of those things where I just had a conversation with a guy a couple nights ago because I told him I just want to cut this off completely. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'll be open, whatever. This the tea. I told him I said, we have a bad soul tie. And he's like, we don't have a soul tie, dude. Yes, we do. And that's the reason why it's hard to let you go, even though I see the constant disrespect. And it's like people have this blinder on where they don't want to believe what God has clearly said, especially with the hookup culture. Wasn't this kind of a thing though in the Bible at one point where like, remind me of what happened. Girl, as far as the land that couldn't get right.
Was it Israel? Wasn't not Israel?
It was the children of right.
My mind is like everywhere, child.
I'm like, I know that this has been a thing before, right? Where like people couldn't get right. Yeah. And then God had to say, all right, well, you know, we're going to have to.
Y'all going to have to go.
You're going to have to go.
You're going to have to go.
You know, and I wonder if we're kind of like living those times now, which is one of those reasons why I feel like sometimes I have unnecessary anxiety because I just see how culture is literally just dominating right now, especially with things like hooking up, soul ties. What's your thoughts on the video?
Girl, I have so much impact on that video. But the one thing that stuck out to me was the transfer. there was a situation like earlier on, like years ago. This is like what, my second boyfriend or whatever. It was not Jesus, blessed be. But I say that to say, like, it was an unhealthy relationship in a sense of me not seeing certain things that were happening because of the sexual activity that we were doing. And you become blinded by those things, so much so to where I remember a pastor saying, sometimes God's gonna have to make you fight through to get through, so you're not gonna go back to what you got through from. And I was like, well, this right here is crazy.
Right.
And so I remember I was so desperate one night. I said, God, I'm having dreams, because I didn't know that I was sexually assaulted by him. I didn't know I was being sexually abused by this man. And I was like, oh, I just thought, but in that moment, I didn't understand. And I literally never told anybody this before, but I was sexually assaulted by him on countless occasions. Yeah. And I thought, oh, this person loves me. I didn't know, like, I was blinded by, oh, okay, like, like, he's here for me. He loves me. We're going to do life together. We're going to just go away and everything's going to be happy and peachy cream. But, like, I remember one moment I watched a sermon because I was so desperate one night because me and him broke up and everything was done. It was called No More Sheets. And this old pastor was talking about how you get, when he goes inside of you, whatever spirit's inside of him is going into you. Yeah. And whatever when y'all have sex, it's like y'all are creating a soul tie of depression, of anxiety, of whatever you're going through, whatever he's going through, it's amplified in both of y'all. See? And y'all realize why you're sad, and then you reach out to that person and they sad, and you like, something ain't adding up. Right. So it's like, it's like you're feeling sad and then he's feeling sad. So it's like, it ain't the math ain't mathing.
I don't know how people can't see that soul ties are a thing, because I firsthand agree with you that I have had that transfer. Like a recent boyfriend of mine, I just became single in October. Thank you, God, for setting me free. But that guy had so much baggage. He had suicidal thoughts. He had a mental illness. He had bipolar. And after our breakup, I had never felt this type of like gut-wrenching pain. I thought I was dying. I mean, you can even ask my bestie over here. It's like, I thought I was dying. I couldn't eat for days. I'm a whole foodie. I'm gonna eat when I have a breakup. I'm gonna overeat. Could not eat. Literally started feeling like there was no purpose for me. I'd only dated the guy for 5 months. I mean, it really shouldn't have been that strong, but the sexual activity that we were doing made it amplify. And so I kind of wonder what it'll take for people to see it. But I mean, it's clear as day that soul ties are a thing. And I'm making a conscious decision to not have too many soul ties and to even pray over soul ties. Cause like I asked my Pastor Arthur, I said, how can I break soul ties? And he was like, keep praying on it and God will break them. But it is a hard thing for you to break. He can deliver you from them. But if you keep going back to that soul tie, I just feel like you kind of keep tying the lace, don't you? You keep tying the shoelace.
Just keep tying it. And one thing I do want to say is, girl, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Like, really, for real, thank you for sharing that, because I think that was like a freeing moment too. Like, you overcome by the word of your testimony. And when you go through things, that shows your growth. Yeah. That shows you're growing. That shows like, I did that last week, but like God forgives me and graces me. Right. And I think that's like the biggest thing that people have to also understand too. Like, soul ties are real, but God's grace and God's love like covers a multitude of sins, and it is like, yo, I see you, I love you. I literally wrote a poem about this on Instagram this morning about that. So I'm like, God is good. So
And I'm sharing too, but I thank you for sharing, what happened to you, and I'm sorry that happened. Yeah. Just it's a confusing feeling to know that someone that you care about is taking advantage. Yeah. And so even to admit that and even to realize that, I think it also takes a tremendous amount of strength. So I appreciate you for saying that as well. Yeah. And something I've kind of been anxious about is the future after this soul tie. The future, what comes. I know that you said on social media that you have ways to overcome anxious thoughts and feelings. Yeah. And if you're dealing with soul ties, if you're dealing with bad breakups, anxiety comes with that, right?
Absolutely.
What are some methods that you do to overcome those thoughts?
I would honestly breathe in that moment, because sometimes when we thinking about stuff, we like, oh my, like our mind.
Woosah.
Yeah.
Woosah before I have to slap it.
Look, because I love God, but we could.
Nook if you buck, Lord. I don't want to do that. But
I can take my earrings off.
Look.
And people don't think because I'm so nice, we can meet me outside.
Put my earrings off and rest it on the Bible.
Look.
And I don't want to have to revert back.
Exactly.
So breathing, that's the first step.
Breathing, that's the first step. Because, child, the thoughts be, look, okay? But breathe. I'm so for real because, oh, Jesus. But I would say breathing is the first thing because sometimes we're so choked up into thoughts because our thoughts are going, no, all the time, like a mile a minute. So breathing and then just sitting in a space of resting and then also writing down what you're thinking because that's going to help you process what you're actually thinking about, what you're actually feeling. And a lot of people don't want to do this step because they are going to feel what's deep inside. They're feeling the emotion of, oh my goodness, anger of, but what if I'm not supposed to be angry? I'm not supposed to be this. You're not supposed to be what? Like, because you have your own thought process of what church feels like you should be, shouldn't be. Like you have a right to be angry. You have a right to feel what you're feeling, but don't allow it, like you said earlier, to overcome you. So I would say breathe like 4 times, write it down, and then pray for scripture to help you combat when those thoughts come. Because when you haven't forgiven someone, when you feel anger about something, or whatever the case is, those thoughts continuously come. But you have to like forgive again, pray again, recite scripture again to remind yourself, okay, I'm still here.
Right. And it's like for me, when I see people speak negatively, I do go to scripture, right? Because it puts me in that anxious space. But I feel like the enemy attacks me through people. I feel like even what I see on social media, because that's what we're at this point all addicted to. And I try my best. Like on Sundays, I do no social Sundays. So I encourage you and everyone else to do that.
I need that.
You need a reset. You know what I mean? Like just take a full day off. But I feel like the enemy's attacking me through people. And so I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where how do you block off the things that are being told to you, and so that you can walk in faith, especially as women of God. We've got to cover ourselves. We've got to protect ourselves because we're being attacked the most. The enemy does not like what we're doing and how we're moving. So how do we guard ourselves from that so that we're not being sucked into fear, but that we just keep walking in faith because we're so sure of what it really is?
Yeah. It's just seeing what happened to you, noticing it, keep it noted, put it in your back pocket and be like, God, I know you just saw what just happened.
Right.
I know you just saw what just happened, but I know that you have greater for me. And I know that you're going to help me get through this, but allow me to sit in this feeling, sit in this moment, and then have a conversation with the person. I think it's so important to have conversations with people, especially if they're around you and they did you sideways and you're like, God, I'm not trying to pop off, so I need you to help me.
Yes.
So I would say like really just praying about saying something before you say it. And even if it's online, just say, God, turn off your comments if you need to. If they're being negative, like continue to guard your heart and to be confident in what God said, no matter what somebody says. Yeah. Because that's one of the hardest things to do, especially as creatives, as women, that we feel everything. And God is like, I got you. And you like, but Sam said this over here. Right. Like Susie said this. And it's like, I know they said all these things, but just like they came after Jesus, they're going to come after you too. Right. But resting and knowing that Jesus overcame the world and can help you through any situation of doubt, of fear, of people coming at you left field. And it's like, but I thought they were supposed to be here for me.
Right. And especially as a creative, especially with the podcast, I hear mixed reviews. I've been getting a lot more positive than negative. Yeah. But the other day on the Shade Room, someone said, I just listened to your podcast and it sucks. And I just really was like, God, that hurt my feelings so much. But something in my gut told me like, they didn't even listen to it. You know what I mean? They didn't even listen, but they wanted to hurt you because your comment about God says do this just pissed off their spirit that they wanted to attack you. And so when it comes to like creatives having to stay strong and like not let that type of stuff get to you, you really do have to like take that stuff and like kind of let it out your ear. Cause like, it's not true.
Cause the higher you go, I make a lot of content on TikTok and it's encouraging, do a lot of poetry, stuff like that. So it's like someone put on a comment about a word that God gave me to put out and it blew up, but there was one negative comment and I was like, should I delete this? And God was like, absolutely not. Because
keep it up.
Like, yeah, for real. So that just should show you like to keep going no matter what anybody says. Because the higher you go, there are going to be more and more people that say, oh, girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Girl, she thinks she all that. Girl, she over there doing that, and she just did a podcast about this. Relax. Go sit down.
Yeah. And see, TikTok is definitely that platform where I have to approve of your comment. So if you come for me, I'm going to delete it. That's what I feel that too. Because it gets to me. I mean, I'll just be real. I don't like that type of stuff. And so I do delete it. I wish that Instagram would pick up on that. Y'all want to copy off everybody else. Copy off that concept. How about that? I wish they would.
I got the block concept going.
Yeah.
So I really need to stop.
I block strangers every day. I don't even know you, but you're blocked.
So I'm glad we're here because I'd be really ready to come through and God be like, don't do it. None of your content. Because I'd be really, look,
I'm not going to start over. I know. That's the problem. People got trigger fingers. But, you know what I mean? They got these Instagram fingers. And it's like, you wouldn't say that if I was here. Because I feel like even our energy, you would be able to calm down and maybe if I was in your actual like space, you wouldn't be so angry, you know?
Some people have demons. Just because your presence is there, their demons cannot stand you. Right. And I had to learn that. Girl, I don't go places I'm not welcomed anymore.
Yeah.
And people are like, where you at, girl? I'm minding my business.
Yeah. Yeah, I discovered that at a couple of jobs where you could just walk in and people just act like they don't like you. And I used to let it get to me, but it's like something about your spirit don't like my spirit, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I love how you are a mental health coach.
Yeah.
You're a prophet, or you're prophetic. Sorry, I want to say that correctly. But also you have a book out. It is called Precious Moments of Solace. So tell us a bit about your book, what inspired it, your poetry, and how can we get our hands on this?
Yes. So it is on Amazon. It's called Precious Moments of Solace. And pretty much I wrote a lot of these poems years ago, back in 2014. I lost so many USBs that I had this book on. And God was like, literally like, go into a compartment in your room and you'll find what you're looking for. And I was like, what? I went in because God told me to go in. I found the USBs that this book was on. Oh. And girl, I was like, praise the Lord. God was like, it's time to release.
Perfect timing.
So pretty much this book is a book of poems. I wrote this book back in 2014, a lot of the poems back in 2014. And it just helped me overcome depression, overcome suicide, overcome mental struggles that I had that I really didn't talk about because I don't want to seem crazy. I don't want to seem too much. And I realized when I went to a church called Influencers Kennesaw, shout out to them, they taught me how to do photography. Okay. And so I incorporated visual photography in there, and I did poetry. There's a lot of journal entries and questions to ask yourself throughout the book. So it's pretty much a book of poetry, but a book of like how to overcome to become the best version of yourself.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't think I had a voice. I knew I did poetry. I knew I did all these things, but I was like, no, I can never be what I know I already am, that God already called me to be. Right? I just stepped into it confidently and boldly to say, hey, I feel the fear, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I read bits and pieces. Yes. This is an amazing book. I feel like this is an encouraging book for low times, you know, where you're low, where you're unsure. Yeah. And not only is it one of those like confidence building type of books, but also it does bring you back to God and being sure of what he wants for us, that he loves us. I think I saw that in here, that one says, and I just want to, hold on one second, table of contents, it says him. H-I-M, just period, him. Is that about God?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's about it.
Yeah. So it's like one of those things where I feel like this is definitely needed for women of God, women of faith. Yeah. And I thank you so much, Alexis, for coming on. Can we see anything new from you in 2024? Because we're, a couple of weeks away from 2024, which is wild. So tell us where we could follow you for one, and tell us a bit about, do we have anything coming next year?
So pretty much next year, you're going to see me doing a lot of makeup, a lot of events centered around makeup, photography, centered around mental health, and incorporating all that in one event, in multiple events. Okay. So God has really just showed me something I've never seen before. And I'm excited just to push forward, like in all that he's called me to do. It's not going to be easy. It's a lot, but I'm taking one step at a time, and I'm going to be doing a lot more poetry events as far as like performing and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that God is like 2024 is going to be crazy.
Yay. And I'm excited about 2024.
Girl, me too.
So tell us where we can follow you.
And you can follow me at I am Alexis Riva on Instagram. And then TikTok is AlexisLR_.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure that you give her a follow, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.